G'day and kia ora. Aotea here. Welcome to part 8 of my skinning series. This time we'll be looking at creating the damage layers for our vengeance. This is the final step before I package everything and upload it to War Thunder Live, so things are getting close to completion. There's not much to this process really. I add some bullet holes, make them transparent, and add a little soot to help sell the effect. So let's get right into it. Okay, I've tidied up the project by collapsing all of the groups. Now I'll open up the damage group and turn it on so we can see what we make. I'm going to change my brush so that I can draw a bullet hole easily. If you don't have them already, Google bullet hole brushes for Photoshop. Okay, now I'll change the size of the brush. I don't want it to look like we've been shot by howitzers. I'm setting mine to 35, although strictly speaking it would probably be smaller than this. But Japanese AA could make holes about this size, and by the time the RAAF vengeances were in the Pacific, the threat from the air had nearly passed. I also don't want my bullet holes to all look identical, so I'm going to use the brush control panel and click Shape Dynamics. I'll set the size jitter to 0, I don't want them changing size, but the angle jitter to 100%. The size will stay the same, but the bullet holes will rotate at a random angle each time I click it. Okay, now I'll just pepper the wing with some randomly placed hits. I try not to make them too evenly spaced, so occasionally I like to put a couple close together. I'll do the other upper wing too. Maybe a nice run of holes like it got sprayed in a close fight. Okay, I'll do one side of the fin and rudder now. And both upper surfaces of the tailplane. Now let's move on to the fuselage. Okay, I want to also have larger areas that have been damaged, like a panel or a part of a panel that's been blown off or destroyed. I'll start with the leading edge of one of the wings. I'm scaling up the bullet hole brush to 160. Bam! A huge bullet hole, but that's not really what we want. So I'll drop the size again and start going over the hole, making sure I get rid of most of the grey and making the hole itself dark black. Now that's one method of doing it. I'll show you the other one too. This time I'll do some damage to the rudder. I'll pick a polygonal lasso tool and draw a big area that I want to damage. Now I'll flood fill it with black, and this time I'll erase parts of the edge to give it a more ragged feel. I'm using a nice random eraser brush, and I'll bring up the brush presets. I'll turn on the shape dynamics, and you'll see that my size and angle jitter are both set to 100%. My flip X and flip Y both are turned on too. Now I'll set the size to something more reasonable, like 29%. Now I'm just going to gently erode the edges of the black area. Now you've probably noticed that while I've peppered shots all over the fuselage, I've only riddled the upper surfaces of the wings and tailplane and only one side of the fin. That's because this step creates transparent gaps in the skin, holes that you can see through. On a thin surface like a wing, a hole in the top surface really needs to match up with one in the bottom surface. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a copy of the holes in the top surface, then put them over the right part of the lower surface. I'll go back to Shapes group and select the shape of the upper wing by control-clicking on the thumbnail of the wing upper layer. Now I'll Control-J to make a copy of what's selected. In this case, only the holes that are on the wing upper surfaces. I'll use the rectangular marquee to select only the holes on the starboard wing. Then let's go up to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. Now I'll reposition that layer so that the holes line up with where they should. I'll do the same for the port wing. Let's do the same for the fin and rudder. I'm also going to change the damage a little so that the two sides aren't completely identical. Okay, now it's the horizontal tailplane's turn. Again, make the copy with Ctrl-J, then isolate just the port side by using the rectangular marquee tool. Then move the holes to the port underside tailplane. In this case, the two surfaces are flipped vertically, not horizontally. So we'll need to do that now. I'm judging where the placement goes by proximity to the hinge point that's visible on the top and bottom surface. Now the same for the starboard side. Grab it, flip it, position it. Too easy. Okay, so now we've got a few extra hole layers over here that we want to clean up. Firstly, I'll select all of the extra layers, but not the original holes layer. I'm making sure that they're all above the original layer and all touching, with no other layers in between. Now I'll right-click on any one of the selected layers and pick Clear Layer Style from the pop-up menu. That will get rid of my thin silver stroke. Next, I merge all of those selected layers together using Ctrl-E. Then I merge them into the layer below using a second Ctrl-E. When you do this, the upper layer will take on the effects of the bottom layer and its name too. But if you have both layers selected before you merge, the opposite happens. The bottom layer takes on the name and effects of the top layer. Okay, time for one of the critical bits. We're about to add an alpha layer, telling the program which things we want to be transparent. In this case, the holes. So the first thing we need to do is Control-click on the thumbnail of the holes layer. Remember that this selects all of the shapes on that layer. So all holes will be selected, but not the silver stroke around them. Next, I'm going up to the tabs at the top of the layer stack. There's one next to layers called channels that we're going to be using. When you click on it, you'll see 4 channels that are turned on: RGB, red, green, and blue. And one channel switched off called Alpha 1. Turn on Alpha 1 by clicking on the eyeball next to it, and then select the Alpha 1 channel itself. We're going to flood fill the hole shapes now with black. So that's Alt plus backspace. All of the holes will turn transparent red to show you that they're going to appear see-through in the final skin. Not that hard, was it? Now turn off the Alpha 1 layer again by poking it in the eye, then select RGB again. The 4 layers will turn on as the Alpha layer turns off. Now we want to add a bit of carbon scoring and soot around each bullet hole. I've still got all of my holes selected, so the first thing I'll do is up the size by going to Select, Modify, Expand, and then typing 20 into the Expand by box. You can now see crawling ant lines around all of the bullet holes and damage. I'll select the soot layer and flood fill with black. Now it looks terrible, I know, but we're only part way there. Turn off the selection using Ctrl-D, otherwise this next step won't work. Go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Drag the slider up to something that works for you. In my case, at this size, I'm using 25. I'm also going to knock down the opacity of this layer to something like 60%, just to soften it a bit more. The last thing I'm going to do here is to add some oil leaks to holes near the engine. I do this pretty simply by adding a new layer above the holes layer. I draw a long, thin rectangular marquee the same height as the hole, then I do a gradient fill, black to transparent, along the box. Remember that if you hold down Shift while you're dragging the cursor, it will constrain the movement to vertical, horizontal, or 45 degrees. I'll do them all first before adding a Gaussian blur to the layer. In this case, 4 looks about right to me. Okay, that's it for the C map. Now we need to fix up the N map. I'll go there and close up the expanded layers, making sure I click on the layer that I want the damaged layers to appear above. Now I'll go back to the C map and close up the damaged layer group. I'll select it and right click on it and then pick Duplicate Group from the pop-up menu and select the N map. Let's go back there again. We need to make a couple of changes. I'll expand the damage group and select the stroke on the holes layer by double clicking it. Grey won't work in the N map, and it's tempting to think that we need a metallic colour, a blue or a pink or a purple. Strangely, those don't work well in this case. Because the stroke is so thin, they tend to twinkle and shimmer a bit in an unnatural way. I found that just a yellowy gold gloss colour seems to work okay. So change the stroke to that. Next, we want to change the soot from black to dark green, which will make the finish matte. In my case, I've already got my presets sitting here waiting to be used. So I'll select the flat layer, right click and pick Copy Layer Style. Then I'll select the soot layer, right click and pick Paste Layer Style. I'll do the same for the oil layer above the holes. And that's it. In the next video, we'll be looking at doing everything we need to package the content into something for War Thunder Live, and making sure it meets the requirements for the new marketplace. Until then, kia kaha.